Alright, how's everybody doing? I'm going to start my new channel with this first video on how to set up my favorite text editor, Visual Studio Code. So Visual Studio Code I use in preference over Sublime, mainly because the terminal comes inbuilt with a shortcut on the keyboard with Command J, and that will just pop it up right there. And another keyboard shortcut just for future reference, Command B closes and opens the side drawer. So we're going to take a look at the extensions that I use to set up Visual Studio Code. This is mainly to make future videos that much easier to follow and understand. So if you prefer to follow step by step, then I suggest you install the same extensions and have them enabled to make that a possibility. So we'll start off and we'll just go down in alphabetical order, and starting with this auto rename tag. So auto rename tag will just take the HTML tags and rename both the ending tag, the closing tag, and the opening tag when you change either. This just makes it easier to update code as you go along, if you change your mind on a tag or add extensions to it, this and that. So auto rename tag, super useful. And yeah, it mainly used in pure HTML and CSS, but when I'm using something like Nuxt and Vue, then it's kind of not necessary. So I'll show you what I mean later on in the next video. The next one on the list is Beautify. So there are a few extensions here in the Visual Studio Code that just format code and make it look beautiful and pretty and stuff. So that's where the names come from. So Beautify and Prettier. Same with ESLint. So these ones will give you the proper indentation, the proper spacing, and things like that. So these are useful if you're writing something where the ESLint will have a error and won't compile because of formatting errors and things. So you can hit a shortcut on the keyboard, it's just Command Shift and F on Mac, and it will format your code. So color picker, I have this because when I use Vue and Nuxt JS apps, when I'm creating with those frameworks, sometimes the color highlighter, this sort of a preview for colors, when you type color in the CSS syntax or SCSS, it doesn't give you a preview, and sometimes the color picker that Visual Studio Code has built in doesn't often come up. So I installed this extension, color picker, which allows you to use a keyboard shortcut of Alt-C and then the keyboard letter P, and this will bring up this color picker like it shows here, and you can just drag it anywhere and pick the color, and it will import it into the code. The cool thing is it imports it in any file type or any type of color, so whether it be hexadecimal, HSL, or RGB. So yeah, very useful, super efficient when it comes to trying to pick nice colors on the cuff. ESLint, like I say, it's similar to Beautify, except this one formats your code to have the proper syntaxing. So for JavaScript, it might be semicolons at the end of script lines. It might also be commas at the end of objects and new line and arrays and things. So this just makes it easier if you miss something while you're typing quite quick, and you just hit Command Shift F, and it usually brings up a selection of formatters, so you can pick your ESLint, your Prettier, and that such. Happy Flasker. I use this because I code in the backend with Python and primarily Flask as my framework. So again, this just makes the coding that much easier. It has snippets and syntax highlighting for Flask also. So this is super useful, but maybe not something we'll see for a few videos yet. HTML CSS support, something like this already comes built in with Visual Studio Code. I sometimes get extras just to make sure I'm not missing any app types or file types. So as you can see here, it says supported languages are .html, Laravel, Blade, and so what we're most concerned with is Vue and Pug, and JavaScript as well. So this just means that Visual Studio Code will identify those file types or language types, and then be able to offer syntax highlighting and code previews and such. Material icon theme. This actually just themes the icons in the app drawer when you're working on a project. So you can see here when you type something with the .js ending or .sketch, things like that, it'll have like a really nice image. It just makes it look pretty. Monokai Pro. I don't actually use this one, so I might just disable it. How about that? So disabling is really cool. Reload required. That's just because it's a theme, it's in the background. Nightwolf is the one I'm actually using. I just prefer the look. It's a nice blue. The syntax highlighting is fantastic. Yeah, awesome. But yeah, you can choose any theme at this point. This one might not be necessary to be able to keep up with any of the videos and things. So yeah, open in browser. This just allows you to do like a command left click to open stuff in browsers, as well as opening this .index HTML stuff and things. But if you use something like a live compiler, that just already does it, so it's a lot easier. So maybe this is another one I'd maybe just disable. Path IntelliSense. This allows you to finish path extensions, so when you're adding like a source for the image file, or a location to a root folder or directory in your file, so this just allows the previews to present that to you, so it's a lot easier to find. Prettier, this is like the beautify up top. It's just a different formatter. This is mainly because this is used by Nuxt, whereas beautify, I just used that one just because I like the look of it at the time, but Nuxt requires prettier, so this is what I use now most of the time. Python, this is because I code with Flask, so I use a Python virtual env, and it has a lot of other extensions and supports for Python file types and projects. Again, you won't see that for a little while because I'm mainly focusing front end to begin with. It's just that much easier to get into. Sass. So this is syntax highlighting for Sass file types. This is mainly used for, like, again, HTML and CSS file types, but also for .view. And so you need a specific one for .view for it to work and to highlight. The Sass formatter just gives you the proper indentation. Same with the SCSS. So Sass formatter just means that there's no semicolons at the end of lines and curly braces to enclose CSS properties. So the Sass formatter takes care of that for you, so you can write a little bit quicker and just hit the Command Shift F and it will format that for you. SCSS formatter does the same, except it adds obviously the curly braces and the semicolons at the end. I actually now exclusively use Sass. I just prefer the writing style, and also because I now use a Pug templating engine on Vue and Nuxt, and it makes the syntax look really similar, and I like that. You'll see when I get a project up and running too. And the SCSS IntelliSense is to help finish off code. So if you start with color or border radius, it'll give you a preview of what you might be trying to type. So SQLite, I have that disabled because I no longer use that extension. I use MongoDB. Vueter makes allows VS Code to be able to identify the .view file types and gives you the snippets and emit codes and linting on error check and things you can see here. It's just as simple as installing it, and it will just be working in the background every time you run a .view file. Vue2 snippets and Vue VS Code snippets are just snippets for Vue projects. So instead of having to remember all the boilerplates such as like template, script, style, remember to enclosing everything in a single div, this just takes care of that, so you can get straight to the writing the content as well as the styles and scripting. Yeah, I highly employ using snippets. It makes code writing so much quicker, so much more efficient, and you have less things to memorize, and you just have to apply more of what you know. So yeah, these are the examples of the type of things you can get from typing the snippet. So for example, if you type like vdata, it'll give you a component data as a function, which is, again, by the documentation when we go through your Vue project on Nuxt, Vue as a data as a function is the most appropriate way to use it instead of data as an object. So same method, and these are just shortcuts. It's so much easier to remember. And then, so these three actually are the same. The Vue Pug snippets is the same thing as these two, except it works when the language type of the template is set to .pug. So I like I say, I use that all the time now. I just love the way it looks. There are currently 32 extensions, so it hasn't got as many as these two for sure. But that's why I have these two, is that you can actually use these as an idea of how you're writing the tagline or something, the tag snippet, and then you can just convert it into a VuePug format. And again, it's really simple, and you'll see that when we get coding. But I really suggest trying VuePug snippets, or Pug in general, when you're writing HTML. Yeah, it's just a pleasure to write with a templating engine. Ever since I tried Flask with Ginger 2, yeah, I really suggest trying something like that. It just makes writing so much more concise and succinct. The Vuetify pug snippet is the same thing, except it combines pug formatting with Vuetify snippets. So that's really important because I use Vuetify as my CSS framework when I'm running a Nuxt app. Mainly because of the components. It's so full of components, it's lovely, and also the JavaScript type components like drop down menus and carousels, they work so great and so easy to customize and add, and I don't see why else to use something like Bootstrap, which even with JavaScript or jQuery rather being taken off the dependencies, I don't mind about the size of a CSS framework. It's more about the joy of coding with it. I'll let the size and overhead of CSS become a problem when performance is an issue, but you know, while you're designing and coding, it's kind of nice to be able to write something quick, succinct, and looking beautiful for sure. So that's why I use snippets a lot, and that's why I'm using Vuetify too. Vuetify VS Code is same as before, but this is just when it's not in a .pug file type. So this just gives you the snippets while you're in a regular Vue app. So yeah, these are all the snippets and extensions rather that I use for Visual Studio Code. I would suggest that you install most of them just to be able to follow along. Like I say, somewhere they repeat, you'll see whether or not you need them. As you've seen and previously up here, like Open Browser, it's so easy just to disable and enable stuff, so it's not a problem. Yeah, so I really suggest using extensions. It just makes it so much easier to write code, so much more succinct, and you have to remember less, which is great, especially if you're using something like Stack Overflow or the documentation. Being able to quickly read what you need, and then just having to type roughly what you saw, and then having the snippet bring up exactly what it's meant to be. So it just makes that process a lot quicker too. The final thing I'll leave with is the types of installers I use. So I'm running on Mac, and this is High Sierra. I think it's 10.13, I believe. But so the main thing is to get Homebrew on a Mac. So this is just so when you use a terminal, you can install softwares. I wouldn't know the appropriate word, but on here it's to install like caskets and stuff. So through terminal. So I highly suggest using Homebrew. I think the alternative is Macbook. So those are the two options, but I just like Homebrew, it's so much easier. And then once you have Homebrew installed, I use Yarn too. So this is just another thing if you want to be able to follow on my videos. A lot of my terminal instructions will be like Yarn install or Yarn run. The alternative to this would be npm, and the only difference is they pull from the same dependency files, so it's the node dependencies or node library. The only difference is Yarn is supposedly quicker, and I like cats, so this is just all full of cats. It's cool. But yeah, Yarn is meant to be quicker because it downloads simultaneously, and so it's quicker. But this is how to install it. There's the documentations and stuff. But if you go back, like say if you have Homebrew installed, it's as easy as typing brew install yarn into your terminal. Then like say here's the alternative, which is Macbook. Yeah, and once you get that, then everything in the next videos will be so much easier to follow. And yeah, I hope to see you in the next video, and thanks for watching, and tune in next time for when we'll build a simple but efficient web app using a Nuxt framework, where we'll be able to use a lot of these snippets and see how simple it can be to make something reactive and with good SEO. So yeah, thanks for watching. See you next time.